When it comes to self-mastery and inner work, you've been trained to look in one direction your whole life. This episode is about what becomes possible when you turn the other way. One direction gives you meaning. It helps you interpret your experience, place it in context, and understand what it says about you. The other gives you access. It turns your attention toward function, structure, and the mechanics of what's actually happening beneath the experience itself. And that difference matters more than it may seem. Meaning can deepen your understanding, but access changes what you can do. It opens the possibility of working with your inner life more directly, more precisely, and with far less dependence on storytelling, narration, and interpretation. This is Amara Strand. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're talking about that second direction, the one that you're not trained to look in, and about what becomes possible when you stop relating to your inner world only through explanation and begin learning how to approach it as a domain you can actually perceive, understand, and work with. We're looking at narrative and function. These are the two approaches to your inner world. And there's a question you've leaned into your whole adult life whenever you experience something difficult in your inner world. And that question is why? Why did that affect me so strongly? Why, when I can see what's happening, do I still get pulled into it? And that question has shaped far more than you realize. It's locked you into one direction of inquiry, which has locked you out of a whole other level of understanding and working with your inner world. The ideas in this series aren't complicated. You can follow them intellectually without much difficulty. But intellectually following them and actually receiving them are two different things, because what I'm pointing at runs in a completely different direction than the one your attention has been locked into your whole life. And that's not a criticism of how carefully you've been listening to what I've been saying. It's a description of the problem itself. What I've been presenting across the previous 4 episodes, which forms kind of a mini-series, these ideas aren't difficult because they're dense or abstract. They're difficult because they require you to look somewhere you've never been taught to look. And the pull back toward the familiar direction is automatic, constant, and almost impossible to notice from the inside. Today, let's look at the heart of what these past 4 episodes have been pointing at, and more importantly, give you a simple place to start that makes it usable. And that one thing is a direction, specifically the one you haven't been looking in. Let's look at the ground we've covered so far in the past 4 episodes. And if you haven't listened to them, I've created a playlist where you can easily just run through all of them. So in episode 1, clarity was defined not as a feeling of certainty or a state of calm, but as accurate orientation. Your internal system pointed at what's actually happening rather than at a mental reconstruction of it. Without that orientation, your choices stop originating from you. You're running on an internal substitute for reality, and you don't know it. In episode 2, we explored the mechanics of why that orientation keeps collapsing. There are 2 internal systems, and you've been automatically handing authority to the wrong one. The synthetic mind, the system that explains and interprets rather than the natural mind, the system that simply knows. And that handoff of authority is so fast and habitual, it doesn't even feel like a choice. In episode 3, we uncovered why you abandon your own authority the moment it becomes consequential. You've reached a structural limit in your inner architecture, and if you haven't developed true adulthood, your system can recognize truth, but it isn't built to hold the full weight of acting on that truth. In the last episode, episode 4, I revealed that the inner world, the actual domain your experience arises in, is almost entirely unknown to you. Not the thoughts and feelings that move through it, but the world itself, its structure, its governing conditions, the mechanics that underpin what you experience. Your focus is locked in one direction, and that direction is narrative. In each of these past episodes, I've asked you to simply unlock your focus and turn to face the other direction, which is mechanics. Not why things are the way they are, but how they work, how they function, and how you can learn to work with the mechanics of your inner world to develop real self-mastery. Let's talk about the habitual turn toward meaning. When something happens in your inner life, a feeling surfaces, a familiar pattern activates, your attention moves toward it with an immediate, practiced reflex. It reaches for the story. Where did this come from? What does it mean? What does it connect to? What does it say about who you are? This is the narrative move, and it's the foundation of virtually every inner work tradition you've encountered. Therapy is built on it, self-help, psychology, personal development. The familiar framework through which inner experience is understood and worked with is built on this one move. Turn toward the experience and make meaning of it. And if you've been doing this work for any length of time, your narrative move is probably sophisticated. You can trace a reaction through several layers. You can identify a belief underneath the feeling, the early experience underneath the belief, and that's real skill and it has value. It's also inexhaustible. The narrative move never runs out of material because the synthetic mind, which is the system driving it, generates continuously. There's always another layer, another connection, another reframe, another framework to apply. You can spend your whole life inside it, developing depth and fluency without ever reaching the bottom of it, because it doesn't have a bottom. It has only more of itself. And this is the direction your attention has been locked into. But there's something that narrative will never give you. And here's what I want you to realize. Understanding why something happens in your inner life and developing the ability to work with it directly are not the same thing. They're not even on the same path. Take a common experience. You absorb other people's emotional states. Someone walks into the room in a bad mood, and within minutes, you're carrying it too. You feel what they feel, sometimes more acutely than they do, and you have a hard time shaking it even after they're gone. The narrative move has a ready answer for this. You're an empath, highly sensitive, porous, open-hearted, perhaps to a fault, and this becomes your story. And then an identity, a way of understanding yourself that feels accurate because it describes the experience precisely. But here's what the story doesn't give you: any actual ability to change what's happening. Because the story explains the experience, it doesn't touch the mechanism producing it. The mechanism, in this case, is your energetic boundary, which is a real structural feature of your inner world, with its own function and its own failure modes. Not the concept of a boundary, it's not a metaphor, it's an actual functional mechanism of your inner reality, and it either operates correctly or doesn't. It can be understood at that level of how it works. A person who understands their boundary at the level of mechanism doesn't need the empath story. They know what's happening. They know where the failure point is, and they know how to work with it directly. The label of being an empath is fine, but optional. The difference between those two positions isn't insight, it's direction. One is looking at the experience and asking what it means. The other is looking at the experience and asking how it works, and then going to work at that level. A plumber doesn't need to know the story of how your kitchen sink got blocked to unblock your pipes. The skill is entirely at the level of the mechanism, and crucially, working at that level doesn't require the story at all. Not the history, not the meaning, not the identity, just direct engagement with how the thing actually functions. Your inner world works the same way. There are mechanisms operating in it right now, governing your energy, your clarity, your capacity, your relationships that have nothing to do with your story about them. They can be known directly, worked with directly. The skill to work at this level is something you can develop, but first you have to learn how to point your attention in the right direction. What I've just described is probably genuinely unfamiliar, not as a concept, but as a lived experience of where to look. When I ask someone to set aside the narrative and turn their attention toward the mechanics of what's happening in their inner world, the first response is almost always the same. Silence, a big blank, a kind of void where nothing comes. This isn't confusion, it's not resistance, it's just nothing. No answer arises. And often after a moment comes the admission, I don't know what you're asking me to look at. What you're meeting in that silence is the limit of the narrative habit. You've stopped asking for meaning, and the part of you that specializes in producing meaning has nothing to say. Your synthetic mind can answer questions about interpretation, but it can't show you the mechanics. So when you ask how this actually works, you hit a blank space, and that's the threshold. That quiet, that blankness, it isn't failure. It's precisely where the other direction begins. But here's what happens. Instead of facing that blankness, that unknown, that unfamiliarity, you fill it immediately with a new attempt at narrative, a question about whether you're doing it correctly, another breakdown of your thoughts, feelings, identity labels. The narrative move is fast, it's practiced, and it's been running uncontested for a very long time. Staying in that void, remaining genuinely open to a direction of inquiry you have no established habit for, requires a willingness to not understand something in the usual way, and to keep looking in that direction anyway. Looking in this direction, the functional, mechanical direction, the how does this work, is my first reflex. When something moves through my inner life, my attention goes immediately to the mechanism. The narrative, the meaning-making, the psychological framing, those come second, if at all. They have their uses, but they're not where the actual work happens. And in my experience, most of the time, the narrative is completely optional. If my priority is to affect and coordinate what's actually happening in my inner world, it's almost never necessary for me to know the story behind it. I go straight for working with it on an energetic level. The interesting side effect of this is that I carry around very little narrative about myself. I'm really lightweight, you might say, and that's just a byproduct of my habit of looking to my inner workings and not to the story. I'm not saying this to suggest I'm wired differently in some special way. I'm sharing it because it tells you something important. Looking in and mastering this direction is natural. I've always been this way since I was a kid. It's not advanced, not esoteric, not available only to people with particular training. The ability exists in you as much as it does in me, only your focus has literally been jammed in one direction and got stuck in that position. Limiting yourself to this one direction of inquiry circumscribes your entire understanding of your internal world. You're missing half of reality. Once you see that this is a question of direction, not interpretation, the next question is obvious. How do you stop defaulting to the old direction and begin training the new one? The next time something arises in your inner life that you want to examine and work with, go ahead and make the narrative move. Reach for the story, the meaning, the understanding. Do what you've always done. Only now you're going to do it with the awareness that you're looking in one direction. Then once that move has run its course, ask one question. How does this actually work? Allow this question to act as a genuine pivot in the direction of your attention, away from what the experience means and the story about it, and toward what in your inner world is producing it, sustaining it. What is the mechanism here? What's actually operating beneath the story? And when nothing comes, and at first nothing will, stay with it. Don't interpret the silence, that blank space, as failure or as evidence that you're not doing it right. You're not supposed to have an answer yet. This practice isn't about getting an answer. It's about training yourself to look in a direction you've never looked before. The not knowing is the beginning of that, not the obstacle to it. What matters in that moment is whether you can resist the rush back to explain long enough to look more closely at what is actually happening. Instead of settling for the first coherent story that appears, you begin examining the condition of the system itself. You notice where authority has shifted, what has been fed, what has weakened, what has become too permeable, and which process has already begun to gather momentum. Your attention moves from self-description to function. That is the turn. That is where this stops being commentary and starts becoming work. The narrative move has been your whole vocabulary for your inner life. What I'm asking you to add is a second language, one that doesn't replace the first, but takes you somewhere the first can't, toward the structure beneath the story, the mechanics beneath the meaning, the inner world itself, rather than the continuous stream of content that passes through it and the stories you tell yourself about it. That's the other direction. Everything in this series has been pointing there. What changes when you add the functional direction isn't that the narrative becomes useless, it's that it becomes one move among two, rather than the only move available, the story and the function, the meaning and the mechanism, both in sequence, each doing its part. The narrative move tells you what your experience is. The functional move teaches you how your inner world works and opens up the possibility of working with it, developing real skill in that domain and mastering it. One without the other leaves you fluent in a language that describes your experience without it ever giving you a real command of it. And together they offer a more complete practice. What inner work has always been reaching toward and rarely ever arriving at. That's what's been missing. If you haven't listened to the last 4 episodes, I will include them as a playlist in the description below. When you're ready to discover what actually becomes possible, when you learn to turn in the direction of mechanics in your inner world, you can find the tools, the mentorship, and the starting point at amarastrand.com. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and I will talk to you again soon.